You want to get smart, fast, right? Drive deep into complex topics without feeling like your brain just ran a marathon.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Deep Dives, where we take the mountain of information you've shared and extracts the pure gold, the key insights, the surprising facts, the stuff that actually sticks.
And today we're plunging into a pretty fascinating vision for India's future. Indic Accelerationism. We've got the foundational manifesto and related research that lays out this ambitious framework.
Okay, let's unpack this. Indic Accelerationism sounds, well, intriguing. What exactly are we looking at here? What's the core idea driving it?
Essentially, it's a strong push, a commitment, really, to significantly speed up India's socio-economic progress. And the way they propose doing that is by strategically using modern technologies, think AI, machine learning, blockchain, big data.
The usual suspects tech-wise.
Right. But combined with applying fundamental, first principles thinking. The aim is to build upon the economic reforms of 1991, sure, but also to really streamline, or maybe refactor is the word they use, the older, sometimes inefficient system.
Refactor?
Yeah, they use this great analogy, refactoring the spaghetti code of the pre-liberalization era.
Refactoring spaghetti code. I like
Yeah.
that. So it's not just about slapping new tech on top of old ways of doing things.
Precisely. That seems to be a core belief of IA, forging a development path that is distinctly Indian.
Okay. Distinctly Indian. How so?
Well, it's about drawing wisdom from India's own history and culture, its civilization learnings, as they put it, and integrating that deeply with cutting-edge technology. So not just, mindlessly adopting models that work somewhere else without really thinking if they fit the Indian context.
Right. And what about the big question we're all grappling with? How do you balance growth, economic growth, with taking care of the planet? Where does IA stand on that?
Yeah, that's crucial. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. IA proposes a sort of nuanced approach. The phrase they use is to degrow our impact on ecology while accelerating civilization.
You grow impact.
Yeah.
Accelerate civilization. Okay, unpack that a bit.
The idea is to pursue progress, yes, but in a way that's sustainable. Moving away from what they call hedonistic consumerism, respecting our environmental limits by really factoring in the ecological costs.
Which often get ignored.
Exactly.
Right.
And ensuring that progress benefits everyone. So thinking about broader ownership of capital, resources, and a fairer balance between the returns you get from labor versus investment.
So it's not just about having more stuff, but a fundamentally different way of growing. Kind of greener and more fair.
That's the goal, yes. And to make this happen, IA really emphasizes the need for better ways for people to coordinate, to work together. Plus, more openness in systems, greater transparency, and increased accountability, especially in how markets function.
Accountability in markets.
Yeah, the goal seems to be freeing markets from what they term crony consumerists. They even talk about needing simpler, interoperable heuristics to help everyone navigate these complex systems more effectively.
Heuristics, so. Like practical rules of thumb. Mental shortcuts that make things easier to understand and act on.
That's the gist of it. Think of it as creating more intuitive ways to make decisions, especially when things get complicated. And, this whole philosophy, it really mirrors the Bharat G20 2023 motto. Accelerate one Earth, include a Bania family, sustain one future.
Ah, right. I remember that.
That tripartite focus, accelerate, include, sustain seems to be the very bedrock of IA. It's a seriously ambitious attempt to synthesize these goals, which, let's face it, often feel like they're pulling in opposite directions.
No kidding. This refactoring spaghetti code idea keeps coming up. It sounds like they're not afraid to really dig in and make some fundamental changes, potentially disruptive ones.
Absolutely. It suggests a real willingness to dismantle or fundamentally reform those inefficient legacy systems using both technology and policy advocacy. So yeah, it could definitely be a disruptive path to modernization.
So with all that, what's the ultimate goal they're striving for? Can we boil down their mission?
They define it pretty clearly around what they call 3 North Stars.
Stars, okay.
First, strong GDP growth. That's the accelerate part. Second, a lower Gini coefficient, that's include, aiming to reduce income inequality. And third, adherence to Doughnut metrics for sustain.
Doughnut metrics. Yeah. Okay, definitely need to circle back to what that actually means.
We will. But just looking at these 3 together, GDP, inequality, and sustainability, it paints a picture of a much more well-rounded approach to national progress, doesn't it?
It really does. Much broader than just GDP alone.
And that's the ambition, apparently, for this holistic set of measurements to eventually become maybe even more significant than just GDP as the primary way India tracks its success as a nation.
That is a bold vision. So how do they actually plan to achieve all of this? What are the main areas they're focusing on to hit those North Stars?
They've outlined four broad categories of overarching goals. First, improve governance. That means tackling corruption head-on, simplifying complex bureaucracy, and stopping what they call rent-seeking, basically unfair wealth extraction.
Yeah, better governance. What's second?
Second, accelerate civilization, but specifically in a way that is sustainable, inclusive, and open. Third is build civility, fostering more trust and safety, making sure contracts are actually enforced, and speeding up the delivery of justice.
Trust, contracts, justice, foundational stuff.
Totally. And finally, the fourth goal is to universalize opportunities, expanding access to open education, skill development, building out robust digital and public infrastructure, and nurturing a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem.
That's a huge agenda, very comprehensive. How do they break these big goals down into more concrete actions? Like, what are the steps?
Good question. They've identified 7 pillars of action. It's quite methodical.
7 pillars. Okay.
It covers the whole life cycle, really. Starts with research mediation. The Sanskrit term is anviki, which is about making sure research actually informs practice. Then design proposals, or kalpana, followed by policy advocacy, nitivada.
So research design advocate.
Then managing the implementation, which they call change management, or yojana. Then the actual building and execution, nirmata. After that comes deployment and operations, vyavahara. And finally, marketing and consultation, savada, getting the word out and engaging stakeholders.
Wow. So it's really an end-to-end approach, isn't it? Integrating the tech build with policy, communication, everything.
Exactly. It's not just about coding. It's about the whole system change.
Okay, we've got a good sense of the overall vision, the philosophy, the goals, the pillars. Now let's zoom in on those foundational pillars you mentioned earlier. They brought up IndiaStack and Digital Public Infrastructure's DPIs. What are these in practical terms? Lay it out for us.
Right. So think of IndiaStack first. It's essentially a set of open APIs, application programming interfaces, and digital public goods. These allow different systems to talk to each other seamlessly for things like identity verification, sharing data securely, and making payments, all at population scale.
So like standardized digital plumbing for the country.
That's a great way to put it. National plumbing for the internet age. The underlying goal is massive financial and social inclusion. DPI, or Digital Public Infrastructure, is the slightly broader concept. It refers to these shared digital systems, often built on open standards, that provide access to essential public and private services for the whole society.
Okay, so DPI is the bigger umbrella term.
Yeah. Think of DPIs like digital roads or railways, foundational infrastructure for the common good, benefiting everyone. The G20 actually reached a consensus definition for DPI in 2023. The vision is a digitally empowered society, a knowledge-based economy, bridging that digital divide.
And it's all centrally controlled.
Not quite. It's more of a federated structure. Different government agencies and organizations own and maintain different pieces of the puzzle.
Interesting. So what are some of the key components we should know about?
Okay, well, the big one is Aadhaar. That's the 12-digit digital identity managed by UIDI. It's been huge. It drastically cut the cost of eKYC, knowing your customer, from maybe $23 down to like $0.15.
Oh, that's a massive drop.
Huge. And it enabled direct benefit transfers, DBT, saving the government something like $41 billion by March 2021 by reducing leakage. Of course, there have been debates around privacy and security, which are important.
Definitely.
Then there's UPI, Unified Payments Interface. Run by NPCI, this is the real-time mobile payment system that's just exploded. We're talking over 13 billion transactions a month now.
13 billion monthly.
Yeah. Over 350 million individuals, 50 million merchants using it. It dominates retail digital payments. It's fundamentally changed how people transact money day to day.
That's incredible scale, truly. What other pieces are part of this stack?
Well, there's DigiLocker, run by Mady, which is secure cloud storage for official digital documents, billions of documents issued. There's eSign, using Aadhaar for digital signatures via open APIs. Then DIPA, the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture.
DIPO, what's that for?
It's a techno-legal framework for consent-based data sharing. So you control who gets access to your data, facilitated by regulated entities called consent managers or account aggregators. It's being rolled out in finance, piloted in health under ADDM, and operates within the new DPDP Act.
Giving users control over their data. Sounds good in principle.
Yeah. Then you have things like OSIN Open Credit Enablement Network, an open API framework trying to democratize access to credit, especially for small businesses, MSMEs, tackling a huge credit gap.
And ONDC, I've heard about that.
Right, ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce. That's trying to decentralize e-commerce using open protocols, moving beyond the big platform monopolies. It's growing with hundreds of thousands of sellers now.
So trying to level the playing field online.
Exactly. And in health, there's ABDM, the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, building integrated digital health infrastructure. ABHAIDs, registries for facilities and professionals, linking health records. Again, all consent-based and aligned with data protection laws. Millions of records already linked.
Health, commerce, finance, identity. It covers a lot.
It does. And education, too, with Diksha. That's the national platform for school education resources, e-content, QR-coded textbooks, teacher training, billions of learning sessions logged. They're integrating AML there, too. And there are others supporting these, like API Setu for government data sharing, GEMBA procurement, GSTN for tax, UMANG for accessing services.
It sounds like a massive interconnected web of digital services. Who actually runs all of this? Who's in charge?
Well, it's a real mix, a complex ecosystem. You have government bodies like MAE, Niti Aayog, the RBI setting policy. You have semi-public entities like UIDI managing Aadhaar and NPCI running UPI. Nonprofits like iSpirit have played a huge role in design, and then, of course, countless private companies building services on top.
So quite fragmented ownership. Does that cause issues?
It can. Governance across such a diverse set of players is definitely a challenge. Coordination, setting standards, ensuring interoperability, it's not always smooth.
But the impact seems undeniable. You hear terms like India pole vaulting in digital development.
And there's justification for that. Some estimate it achieved in 9 years what might have taken nearly 50 otherwise. Financial inclusion has shot up. Estimates are over 80% of the adults now have accounts. Those DBT savings are real. UPI's growth is off the charts. And this infrastructure was absolutely vital during the COVID-19 pandemic for delivering aid and services.
It's a unique model, isn't it? Government building foundational layers, then opening them up for private innovation.
Very much so. A distinct public-private partnership approach.
Okay, it's impressive. But let's talk about the flip side. With all this digital infrastructure, what are the main challenges? The potential downsides we need to watch out for?
Absolutely crucial question. Despite all the progress, the biggest issue is probably still the digital divide.
Right.
Exactly. Connectivity is still a problem for maybe 70% have poor or no connectivity. Then there's device affordability, the cost of data plans, and perhaps most importantly, digital literacy. Around 38% of households lack digital literacy. There are huge gaps between urban and rural areas, different genders, different caste groups.
So the risk is that this digital revolution leaves a lot of people behind.
That's the major risk. And on top of that, we've seen significant data breaches involving Aadhaar data, health databases. Security is a constant concern. Plus, the potential for increased surveillance when you aggregate so much data is something civil society groups rightly raise.
So access, security, privacy.
Right. These foundational issues have to be addressed head-on. If Indic Accelerationism relies heavily on this digital base, making it truly inclusive and ethical means tackling the digital divide and ensuring robust data protection. Otherwise, the foundation itself is shaky.
Got it. Okay, next up in our look at these foundational pillars, interchain Cosmos blockchain technology. Now that sounds pretty futuristic, maybe even a bit niche.
It is cutting edge, yeah. But the core idea is actually quite relevant to the themes we've been discussing. Think of Cosmos as a project aiming to create the Internet of Blockchains.
The Internet of Blockchains.
Yeah, essentially trying to solve the problem that many different blockchain networks currently exist, but they don't talk to each other very well. They operate in silos. Cosmos wants to connect them.
Ah, so interoperability again, but for blockchains.
Yeah.
Allowing different chains to connect and share information or value.
Exactly. The Cosmos tech stack has a few key parts. There's the Cosmos SDK, a toolkit that makes it easier for developers to build their own specialized blockchains. They call these app chains.
App chains, application-specific blockchains.
Right. Highly customizable. You can define your own governance, consensus rules, transaction types. It speeds up development because you can reuse existing modules. And crucially, each app chain retains its sovereignty.
Okay, so building blocks for bespoke blockchains. What else?
Then there's Comet BFT that used to be called Tendermint Core. It's the underlying consensus engine, usually proof of stake, that allows these blockchains to agree on transactions quickly and securely. Fast finality is really important for cross-chain stuff.
Makes sense. You need speed for things to flow between chains.
And the real magic, arguably, is the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, or IBC. This is the standardized way these sovereign blockchains can communicate, transfer data, transfer tokens securely and trustlessly.
Trustlessly, meaning the protocol itself guarantees the security, so the chains don't need a separate intermediary or bridge they have to trust.
Precisely. It avoids relying on potentially vulnerable third-party bridges. It uses things like light clients and relayers to pass messages between chains. There's even work like IBC Eureka to bridge to other major ecosystems like Ethereum.
Okay, and how does this connect back to Indic Accelerationism's goals? Why is this relevant?
Several reasons. First, that interoperability provided by IBC is key if you want different digital systems to work together. Second, the idea of sovereign federated app chains aligns really well with the somewhat distributed federated nature of IndiaStack we just talked about. You can imagine different services running on their own chains.
So mirroring that modular structure.
Exactly. And third, the whole Cosmos ecosystem is largely built on open source components, fitting the open aspect of IA's vision. So the potential here is for a more decentralized digital infrastructure for India. Maybe public services on specialized app chains, interacting via IBC, reducing reliance on central points of control.
Interesting. Is this Cosmos ecosystem significant? Is it widely used?
It's pretty substantial, yeah. There are over 100 IBC-enabled chains connecting billions in market value. There's an interchain foundation supporting development, so it's not just theoretical.
So the philosophy here, layered, modular, interoperable, really echoes the IndiaStack approach, but potentially in a more decentralized way.
You could see it that way. A decentralized architecture with many specialized systems offers flexibility, customization, maybe resilience, but it also introduces its own complexities, governance across many chains, maintaining standards, ensuring a smooth user experience. It's a trade-off.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Let's move to the third foundational pillar, complexity economics. It sounds like it might get, well, complex.
Yeah, the name gives it away. But it's basically a different lens for looking at economies compared to traditional neoclassical economics. A lot of this thinking came out of places like the Santa Fe Institute.
Okay, different lens. What's the core difference?
The main idea is seeing the economy not as a system that naturally tends towards some stable, predictable equilibrium, but as a complex, adaptive system that's perpetually in flux, constantly changing and evolving. Think of it less like a perfectly balanced machine and more like a messy, dynamic ecosystem.
More like biology than physics, maybe. Constant change, adaptation, evolution.
Exactly. The agents in the economy, people, firms, institutions, aren't perfectly rational robots with complete information. They have bounded rationality, they learn inductively, they revise their beliefs, they adapt their behavior based on what others are doing and how the environment is changing. And all these interactions, they lead to the macro phenomena we see.
Like what kind of phenomena?
Things like economic growth, business cycles, innovation, bubbles, crashes, inequality. These aren't necessarily imposed from the top down or tending towards some fixed point. They emerge from the bottom up, from all these micro and meso-level interactions. It's a dynamic view of the invisible hand.
So what are some of the key principles or concepts within this complexity thinking?
Okay, several key ideas. One is non-equilibrium dynamics. The system is almost always far from balance, always changing. Then adaptation and learning agents are constantly adjusting. Emergence big patterns arising from small interactions. Networks are crucial. The economy is seen as an evolving web of connections, and the structure of that web matters hugely.
Networks, emergence.
Also, feedback loops and recursivity actions create patterns that influence future actions, leading to things like cumulative causation. Nonlinearity and path dependence, small changes can have big effects, and where you end up depends heavily on the path you took to get there. History matters. Institutions, rules, norms, structures are seen as patterns that shape future interactions. And methodologically, they often use computational tools like agent-based modeling to simulate these dynamics.
Right, trying to model the complexity computationally. So how does this connect to Indic Accelerationism? Why is this way of thinking important for their vision?
It signals a recognition, I think, of the inherent unpredictability and, well, the complexity of trying to engineer large-scale socio-economic transformation, especially in a place as vast and diverse as India, and especially when you're introducing rapid technological change.
So it tempers expectations of simple, predictable outcomes.
Exactly. It helps explain why IA emphasizes needing to respect the uncertainty of complexity and develop those simpler, interoperable heuristics we talked about. Complexity economics gives you tools to think about endogenous change, change coming from within the system, unintended consequences, network effects, the co-evolution of technology and society. It moves you beyond simplistic cause and effect planning.
So it suggests they probably can't just have a rigid central plan and expect it to work perfectly.
Precisely. It points towards the need for more adaptive governance strategies, policies that are flexible, that allow for experimentation, learning from feedback, monitoring outcomes closely, and adjusting course as needed. It seems much better suited for managing the kind of profound, tech-driven societal shifts IA is aiming for than traditional equilibrium models.
Makes sense. Finally, our last foundational pillar, Doughnut Ecological Economics. I remember you mentioning Doughnut metrics earlier. What exactly is this all about?
Less tasty, more conceptual. This framework comes mainly from the economist Kate Raworth, and it offers a really powerful visual model for thinking about sustainable development. Picture a donut.
Okay, got my donut.
It has two rings, an inner ring and an outer ring. The inner ring represents the social foundation. This is the minimum set of social standards everyone needs to lead a decent life. Things drawn from the Sustainable Development Goals like food, health, education, income, peace, political voice, equity, housing, the basics for well-being.
The floor, basically. No one should fall below this.
Exactly. Then the outer ring represents the ecological ceiling. These are the 9 critical planetary boundaries like climate change, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, freshwater use, land conversion, biodiversity loss, air pollution, ozone layer depletion. The environmental limits we must not overshoot if we want to maintain a stable planet that supports human life.
The ceiling. Don't go beyond this or we're in trouble.
Right. And the goal, the safe and just space for humanity to thrive, is the area between those two rings. Inside the ecological ceiling, but above the social foundation, living within the donut.
So the challenge is to get everyone above the floor without crashing through the ceiling.
That's the core idea. And Doughnut Economics also comes with 7 ways to think, core principles to guide us. Like changing the goal from just endless GDP growth to thriving within the donut. Seeing the big picture, the economy embedded in society, embedded in nature. Nurturing a richer view of human nature, not just self-interested individuals, but social, interdependent, value-driven people.
Okay, changing the goal. Seeing the big picture.
Getting savvy with systems thinking, understanding feedback loops, complexity, designing our economies to be distributive by default, tackling inequality as a design failure, not an inevitability, creating economies that are regenerative, not extractive, shifting to circular models, and finally being agnostic about growth.
Agnostic about growth, what does that mean?
It means seeing GDP growth not as the ultimate goal forever, but potentially as a phase. The focus should be on achieving balance within the donut, whether the overall GDP number is going up, down, or staying level at any given time.
That's a pretty radical shift from conventional economics. How does Indic Accelerationism incorporate this into its vision?
It seems absolutely central, particularly to their sustain mission. It's the explicit basis for their proposed donut metrics. And it also strongly connects to their include goal through the emphasis on that social foundation and the specific aim to reduce the Gini coefficient. It provides the framework for that idea we discussed earlier, trying to degrow ecological impact while still accelerating civilization sustainably and inclusively, moving beyond hedonistic consumerism.
But are there challenges or criticisms associated with this donut framework? Is it easy to implement?
No, not necessarily. Some find that agnostic about growth principle a bit ambiguous, maybe hard to translate into concrete policy. There are definitely methodological hurdles. How do you select the best indicators for all those social and ecological dimensions? How do you set the specific thresholds or boundaries, especially at a national or local level? Getting reliable, consistent data for everything across a country like India is a massive challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine the data part alone is huge.
And some critics question if it's truly a universal framework, or if it might have some inherent Western cultural biases in how it defines well-being or sets boundaries. For India specifically, operationalizing this at a national level is a monumental task. Selecting indicators relevant to diverse contexts, setting thresholds, collecting the data, building political consensus. It's tough.
So the donut metrics might be hard to actually define and measure effectively.
There's a risk of that, yeah. Which could hinder the practical application of the sustain pillar. But it's worth noting how significant a departure this is from some other accelerationist ideas, like effective accelerationism, which tend to put much less explicit emphasis on these kinds of ecological and social limits. IA is clearly trying to build in these ethical guardrails from the start.
Okay, that gives us a solid understanding of the foundations. Now let's get practical. How does Indic Accelerationism propose to actually use technology to achieve this accelerated development? First up, the idea of using AI and blockchain to tackle corruption. How would that work?
Right. The core idea here is to leverage what they see as the key strengths of these two technologies. Blockchain offers transparency and immutability tamper-proof records. AI offers powerful pattern analysis capabilities. The proposal is to combine these to combat corruption, which the IA manifesto calls a significant social disease.
So blockchain makes things visible and hard to fake, and AI acts like a super smart auditor looking for suspicious patterns.
That's the basic mechanism, yeah. Imagine using blockchain to create secure, auditable trails for things like government budgets and expenditures, or for establishing clear and unalterable land titles, or for making public procurement processes completely transparent from bidding to payment. Smart contracts on the blockchain could even automate compliance checks and payments, reducing human discretion points where corruption might occur.
Okay, that's the blockchain part. How does AI fit in?
AI would be used to analyze large data sets related to these processes. For instance, analyzing procurement data to flag potentially collusive bidding patterns. Brazil actually had an AI tool called Alice doing something like this, or monitoring public expenditure data for anomalies. Brazil also had Rosie, though it's inactive now. AI could assess risks in government schemes or detect complex financial fraud patterns like the RBI Innovation Hub's MuleHunter.ai tool aims to do. These systems often use supervised or unsupervised machine learning to spot deviations from the norm.
Have there been moves in India already to use tech like this against corruption?
Yes, there's definitely interest. The Central Vigilance Commission, India's main anti-corruption body, has been pushing for more tech adoption, data analytics, AML, blockchain for preventive vigilance. MAIDI has its national AI strategy. ATI IOG has published papers on blockchain and governance, so the potential is recognized at high levels.
But how feasible is this really? Can tech alone solve something as entrenched as corruption? What are the hurdles?
Yeah, that's the crucial question. It's definitely not a silver bullet. There are significant technological challenges. Blockchain scalability, handling huge transaction volumes efficiently, can be an issue, though newer systems like proof of stake used by Cosmos are better. Interoperability between different systems is key, and cost is always a factor.
And for AI?
AI is hugely dependent on the quality and completeness of the data it's trained on. Biased data leads to biased AI. The black box problem, not always knowing why an AI made a certain prediction, can be an issue for accountability. And simply deploying these systems at scale across government requires massive investment, infrastructure upgrades, and developing new skills. Regulatory frameworks are often still catching up. Plus, AI-generated evidence might not always meet the legal standards needed in court.
Are there ethical dimensions too?
Absolutely. Using AI for surveillance or analysis raises big privacy concerns. The risk of algorithmic bias potentially targeting certain groups is real. With transparent blockchains, you have to think carefully about who sees what data and how it might be misused. And fundamentally, corruption isn't just a technical problem, right? It's deeply tied to social norms, political incentives, institutional weaknesses, vested interests.
So tech can be a tool, but it needs to be part of a much bigger reform effort.
Exactly. Its effectiveness hinges on political will, implementing it within genuinely reformed processes, tackling the data issues, ensuring fairness, and integrating it into a broader anti-corruption strategy. Technology alone will likely fall short.
Right. Okay, let's move on to another major area, using AI in the Indian judiciary. India is famous for its massive case backlogs. Can AI really help clear the docket?
That's the hope driving this proposal. The idea is to leverage AI for several things: speeding up legal research, automating routine administrative tasks, analyzing huge volumes of case documents, maybe helping sort and prioritize cases based on urgency or complexity, potentially offering decision support tools for judges to ensure consistency, and even exploring blockchain for creating irrefutable evidence trails.
That sounds potentially transformative for the courts. Is anything like this actually happening already? Are Indian courts using AI?
There are definitely steps being taken, although it's still early days and mostly experimental or assistive. The eCourts project has made huge strides in digitizing records and processes. The National Judicial Data Grid, NJDG, now includes Supreme Court data alongside high courts and district courts. That's over 50 million pending cases visible there.
50 million.
Yeah. The Supreme Court itself has an AI committee and is piloting some tools. There's SuPace, an AI tool to help judges with research like extracting facts or finding precedents. They stress it's not for decision-making itself, just assistance. Infrastructure upgrades are still needed for wider use.
So research assistance. What else?
There's SUVS, an AI translation tool to translate judgments and orders from English into regional languages, improving access to justice. They've also started using AI for transcribing oral arguments in key Constitution bench cases, making transcripts available online much faster. And they're experimenting with IML in collaboration with IIT Madras to help automatically identify and flag defects in e-filed documents to speed things up.
Interesting. So translation, transcription, filing assistance. It seems focused on efficiency gains around the edges right now.
Largely, yes. The Supreme Court even issued guidelines recently saying lawyers can use generative AI for preparing documents, but the lawyer remains fully responsible for verifying accuracy, so the judiciary's current approach is quite cautious. AI in assistive roles, not replacing core judicial functions like reasoning or judgment.
But the IA vision sounds more ambitious, maybe suggesting AI could help with actual decision support.
It does hint at that, and that's where significant feasibility and ethical questions arise. How accurate and reliable is AI legal analysis, really? What about algorithmic bias creeping in and perpetuating societal inequalities in sentencing or case prioritization? Data privacy for sensitive judicial data is paramount, especially under the DPDP Act. There's a lack of specific regulations governing AI use in courts.
And the judges themselves, would they accept AI help in decision-making?
That's a huge factor. Preserving judicial independence, human discretion, nuance, empathy. These are core tenets. There's likely to be resistance to anything seen as automating judgment. Plus, practical hurdles remain. The digital divide extends into the judiciary, too. Lower courts, rural areas often lack infrastructure and skills. Training is essential. And who's accountable if an AI provides faulty information that leads to a wrong outcome?
So deeper AI integration faces some pretty massive legal, ethical, and practical roadblocks.
It certainly seems so. The current cautious, assistive approach makes sense given these challenges. Moving towards AI decision support would be a much bigger, more complex leap.
Okay, let's shift focus now to technology and education, skill development, and healthcare. These are absolutely critical areas for India's development. What's the Indic Accelerationism vision here?
Across both education and skills, the main goal seems to be universal access to high-quality digital learning, turbocharged by AI for personalization, making learning fit the individual student. This lines up nicely with India's National Education Policy 2020, which heavily emphasizes tech integration and even introducing AI in coding early on.
And in healthcare, India faces big challenges there, right?
Definitely. The IA documents acknowledge India's health infrastructure is, quote, nascent and largely inadequate. Physician-to-population ratios, nurse ratios, hospital beds per capita, they're significantly lower than, say, China, based on World Bank data. IA aims to use tech to bridge these gaps in prevention, diagnostics, fitness tracking, and bolstering the infrastructure itself.
What specific platforms or initiatives are already in place that IA might build upon?
In education, the big one is Diksha, run by the Ministry of Education. It's a huge repository of e-content, teacher training modules, QR-coded, energized textbooks. Billions of learning sessions have happened on it. They're actively working on integrating AML for more personalized learning pathways.
Diksha?
Okay.
Any others?
Yeah, there's PM-Evidya, the SWAYAM platform for online courses, NDIR, which is the National Digital Education Architecture. Lots happening. Plus, specific efforts to bring AI into the curriculum. CBSE offers AI as an elective in skilling programs, like NASSCOM's Future Skills Prime or Intel's AI for entrepreneurship targeting youth.
And on the healthcare side, what's the digital foundation there?
The key initiative is ABBM Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission that's building the core digital health ecosystem. Unique ABHA health IDs for citizens, registries for doctors and facilities, HFR and HPR, and that consent-based framework for sharing health records we mentioned, DIPA. This infrastructure is crucial for enabling future AI applications in health.
So ABDM lays the groundwork. What else is happening?
Telemedicine saw a huge boost during the pandemic, with the government's eSanjivani platform and many private players becoming really prominent. And AI is already being deployed in public health. The Ministry of Health uses it for disease surveillance, scanning news reports for outbreak signals. There are pilot projects using AI for TB screening from cough sounds, predicting TB outcomes. AI-driven clinical decision support is being integrated into eSanjivani. The NCDC uses advanced analytics on its IIT platform, and ICMR has even put out ethical guidelines for AI in healthcare.
The potential seems enormous in both sectors. AI tutors, AI diagnostics. But what are the biggest roadblocks to making this a reality for everyone?
Without a doubt, the digital divide remains the single most critical barrier. It cuts across both education and health. Inequalities in access, reliable internet, affordable devices, even consistent electricity, especially hit rural areas and low-income families hard. This limits who can actually benefit from online learning or telehealth.
It's the foundational issue again.
Absolutely. And beyond access, there's digital literacy. Gaps exist not just among students and patients, but also among teachers and healthcare workers who need training to use these tools effectively. In education, ensuring the quality and relevance of digital content is vital, making sure it's accurate, pedagogically sound, culturally appropriate, and available in multiple languages, not just English or Hindi. And the cost of edtech platforms, devices, data plans, it can easily worsen inequalities if not managed carefully.
It really underscores that tech isn't a magic wand. You need the fundamentals in place.
Precisely. Success hinges on massive concurrent investments in bridging that digital divide, connectivity, device affordability, widespread digital literacy training. Otherwise, you risk technology actually widening the gaps it's supposed to close. And another crucial point, localization. AI tools need to be trained on diverse local Indian datasets like those from Genome India or AI Kosha to be accurate, relevant, and fair for the Indian population. Using models trained primarily elsewhere won't work optimally.
Very important point. Okay, our final area of technological application within Indic Accelerationism, smart infrastructure. What are the key ideas here? What makes infrastructure smart in this context?
The focus here is on using technology, AI, IoT, sensors, data analytics to make infrastructure, particularly transportation networks, more efficient, safer, and sustainable. Also, to improve things like toll collection, enable predictive maintenance, and potentially reduce corruption in how projects are built and managed.
Can you give us some concrete examples? What does smart transport look like in India?
Sure, one area is intelligent transport systems, or ITES. This involves using tech to optimize traffic flow, reduce congestion and emissions, improve road safety, and aid in planning. MORTH, the Transport Ministry, plans to deploy advanced traffic management systems on highways. There's financial aid for ITES and public buses. The Bangalore-Mysore Expressway is often cited as an example where ITES elements have reportedly helped reduce fatalities. The Smart Cities mission also incorporates ITES features.
Okay, managing traffic flow better. What about tolls?
We've seen the shift from cash tolls to RFID-based FASTag. The next step, smart tolls, involves integrating more tech. Things like automatic number plate recognition, ANPR cameras using OCR, AML to verify vehicles and detect fraud, cloud platforms for real-time processing and monitoring, IoT sensors on the toll infrastructure itself. NPCI has even piloted using ANPR for AI-powered parking payments. The goals are seamless, contactless tolling, less congestion, reduced revenue leakage, and better accuracy.
And predictive maintenance. How does that work for roads and bridges?
The idea is to use IoT sensors embedded in the infrastructure or drones equipped with cameras and sensors combined with AI analysis to monitor the condition of roads, bridges, tunnels in real time. The AI looks for early signs of wear or potential failure, allowing authorities to schedule maintenance proactively before something breaks down catastrophically.
That sounds like it could save a lot of money and prevent accidents.
Exactly. Global estimates suggest predictive maintenance can cut costs by 20–30%. For India's huge highway network, over 145,000 kilometers, with massive maintenance budgets that could mean saving thousands of crores. Plus, improved safety, longer asset lifespan, better resource allocation. NHAI is exploring AI and drones for this. There are pilot projects like Nagpur's IIThis, using AI to identify high-risk road sections, and collaborations like NHAI IIT Delhi, using AI for better road signage.
And the anti-corruption angle for infrastructure? How does tech help there?
Similar to what we discussed earlier, the proposal is to use blockchain for transparency in the tendering and contracting process, combined with AI-powered monitoring of project progress and spending. The idea is an immutable record from bidding to completion, maybe using smart contracts for automated milestone payments, reducing opportunities for graft. While large-scale public procurement on blockchain isn't widespread yet in India, the potential is recognized.
It sounds like a lot of these individual technologies, sensors, AI, analytics, ANPR, are reasonably mature and already being tested or deployed. What's the main challenge to creating a truly national smart infrastructure system?
I'd say the biggest hurdle is scale and complexity. Rolling this out nationwide across India's vast and varied geography is an enormous undertaking. It requires huge capital investment, not just upfront, but for ongoing operation and maintenance. Ensuring all these different systems can talk to each other, interoperability is critical. Integrating the massive amounts of data generated, building the robust data infrastructure needed to handle it securely and efficiently. These are major challenges.
So the pieces might work individually, but stitching them all together into a coherent national system is the hard part.
That's a good way to put it. While the tech components are largely viable, realizing the comprehensive vision depends heavily on achieving that scale, seamless integration, effective data management, and securing sustained funding.
Okay, we've taken a really detailed look at the philosophy, the foundations, and the proposed tech applications of Indic Accelerationism. Now, let's try to gain some perspective. How does India's digital public infrastructure approach compare to what other countries are doing?
It's interesting to compare. India's DPI model, especially IndiaStack, really stands out because of its sheer scale serving over 1 billion people, its layered architecture built on those open APIs, and the strong emphasis on public-private partnership are quite distinctive. The focus has heavily been on driving financial inclusion, and India is actively promoting this model globally through things like MOSIP, the Modular Open Source Identity Platform.
How does it compare to, say, Estonia, which is often cited as a digital leader?
Estonia's X-Road system is very mature and highly regarded, particularly for secure data exchange between government agencies and the private sector. It enables incredibly efficient digital government services, strong digital identity, high citizen participation. But its focus has perhaps been more on citizen-state interactions, whereas IndiaStack, and IA building on it, seems to have broader socio-economic transformation ambitions.
What about Singapore or Brazil?
Singapore's digital utilities and SingPass provide seamless access to many government and private services, really focused on urban and business efficiency. IA adds those explicit goals around sustainability and equity, the Doughnut and Gini coefficient, which aren't essential in Singapore's model. Brazil's PIX payment system has been incredibly successful, much like India's UPI, but again, IndiaStack is broader, incorporating identity, data sharing, etc., and IA's overall vision is wider still. China's digital ecosystem is obviously massive and technologically advanced, but it's quite different. It tends to be dominated by huge private platforms with significant state involvement and control. It's generally less open and interoperable than the Indian model aims to be, and there are much greater concerns around surveillance and state control over data. IA's emphasis on openness, interoperability, and potentially federated structures offers a contrasting approach.
Okay, that helps place India's efforts. Now, how does Indic Accelerationism compare to another term we sometimes hear? Effective Accelerationism or EDAC? Are they similar?
There's some overlap, but also significant differences. Both are generally pro-technology, see AI as a powerful driver of change, want to accelerate development and innovation, and might draw on ideas from complexity theory.
So where do they diverge?
The biggest divergence is probably around sustainability and inclusivity. IA makes these core pillars, the Doughnut, the Gini coefficient, the idea of degrowing ecological impact, avoiding hedonistic consumerism. EEC, on the other hand, often prioritizes maximizing technological progress, energy production, achieving artificial general intelligence, and can sometimes downplay or seem dismissive of ecological limits or social equity concerns.
Different priorities then.
Yeah, in different contexts and values. IA explicitly frames itself as Indic, drawing on specific cultural and historical context civilization learnings. EEC tends to be more universalist, sometimes using abstract concepts from physics or information theory. Governance is another area. IA talks about federated ownership, improving human coordination, increasing transparency, maybe using decentralized structures. Each often leans more libertarian, advocating for minimal restrictions on AI and markets, viewing regulation mainly as a hindrance.
And how they view risks, like AI safety.
IA, through its adoption of the Doughnut framework, explicitly acknowledges and tries to build in guardrails against ecological and social risks. Some proponents of EEC, however, have been quite dismissive of concerns about existential risks from advanced AI, seeing them as distractions from accelerating progress.
Got it. And how does IA compare to maybe the more traditional or even radical origins of accelerationist thought, like the ideas associated with Nick Land?
That's a very different beast. Land's work often involves intensifying capitalism's more disruptive, deterritorializing tendencies. Sometimes envisioning a techno-capital singularity, it can feel impersonal, even nihilistic. IA, in contrast, is framed with very clear human-centric goals. Socio-economic upliftment, better governance, civility, sustainability, inclusivity. It talks about reforming and harnessing markets within ethical boundaries, not just unleashing potentially destructive forces. So quite different aims and tones.
Okay. Now, a potential criticism. Indic Accelerationism puts a lot of faith in technology, AI, blockchain, DPI to solve some really complex, deep-seated problems like corruption, inequality, healthcare gaps. Is there a risk it falls into the trap of techno-solutionism?
That's a very fair and important critique to raise. Techno-solutionism is that belief, or maybe bias, towards thinking technology is the primary or even only solution for complex social problems. It can overlook the structural roots, the politics, the social context, the power dynamics, the historical factors. It risks reducing messy human problems to neat engineering challenges.
And IA seems susceptible to that charge.
Given the heavy emphasis on AI, blockchain, and DPI for tackling everything from corruption to judicial backlogs to healthcare access, yeah, it's definitely susceptible. There's a real risk of focusing effort and resources on deploying shiny new tech without adequately addressing the underlying need for institutional reforms, tackling political barriers, fixing social inequalities like the digital divide, or fully grappling with the ethical trade-offs. The Aroja Set2 contact tracing app during COVID is sometimes cited as an example, a big tech push with questionable real-world efficacy and significant privacy concerns.
But does the IA framework itself offer any counters to pure techno-solutionism?
It does seem to contain some elements that push back against it, at least in theory. Remember those 7 pillars of action? They go beyond just build and execution to include things like research mediation, policy advocacy, change management, marketing, and consultation. That suggests an understanding that tech alone isn't enough.
Right, those broader enabling factors.
Yeah. And the explicit mention of needing human coordination and political will acknowledges non-technical factors. The reference to complexity economics also suggests an awareness that you can't just engineer society like a machine. And embedding the Doughnut framework and Gini coefficient as core goals implies a focus on broader outcomes, not just technological deployment itself. The emphasis on finding an Indic path, avoiding mindless copying, also suggests sensitivity to context.
So the framework allows for a more nuanced approach, but the implementation is key.
Exactly. The ultimate trajectory depends entirely on how it's put into practice. There's definitely a risk that the drive to accelerate could lead to prioritizing rapid tech rollout over the slower, harder work of institutional change, capacity building, and tackling inequality. The framework permits nuance, but it needs constant vigilance to ensure technology serves human and planetary goals rather than becoming the goal itself.
Okay, as we start to wrap up our deep dive, let's really focus on the major challenges, the potential criticisms, and the ethical considerations that surround this whole vision of Indic accelerationism. What are the biggest hurdles?
There are several really critical ones. A fundamental tension exists right at the heart of it. Reconciling rapid acceleration, particularly GDP growth, with sustainability within the donut's ecological limits. Historically, economic growth has meant increased resource use and environmental damage. Achieving absolute decoupling, growing the economy while shrinking the footprint is incredibly difficult, maybe impossible at the scale required. How will the resource intensity of deploying all this tech be managed?
It's a huge one. What else?
Another tension is between acceleration and inclusivity. IA aims to universalize opportunities and lower the Gini coefficient, but the heavy reliance on technology risks worsening the digital divide we discussed. If access, affordability, and literacy aren't addressed proactively as prerequisites, acceleration could easily leave more people behind.
The tech could widen the gap it aims to close.
Precisely. Then there's the sheer governance complexity. Navigating India's intricate federal structure, coordinating across ministries, managing the already fragmented DPI ecosystem, and then layering AI and blockchain on top. It demands unprecedented coordination, new regulations, robust oversight, and that refactoring of legacy systems. That implies overcoming significant inertia and resistance.
Implementation challenges galore.
Absolutely. Beyond the digital divide, just basic technological adoption faces barriers. You need massive training programs for users and administrators. Integrating new systems with creaking legacy ones is always hard. Ensuring interoperability is complex. And the costs of deployment and ongoing maintenance are substantial. Plus, the data infrastructure itself needs to be top-notch. AI-driven governance relies on high-quality, accessible, secure data. India faces challenges in data availability, standardization, reliability, and governance. Building platforms like AI Kosha is a massive undertaking.
Out of the human element, politics.
Crucial. You have to anticipate political and social resistance. Transformative technologies disrupt established interests, power structures, employment patterns. Think about farmer protests against agricultural reforms, for example. Implementing IA would require sustained political will across election cycles and very effective change management strategies to bring people along.
Okay, those are huge practical hurdles. What about the ethical dimensions? AI and blockchain ethics seem particularly thorny.
They really are. For AI, the biggest concerns are probably bias and discrimination. If the data used to train AI systems reflects existing societal biases based on gender, caste, religion, region, the AI can end up amplifying those biases in critical areas like judicial support, policing, healthcare access, loan approvals.
Perpetuating unfairness, but faster and at scale.
Exactly. So you need diverse data, rigorous bias detection, mitigation techniques, ongoing audits. Then there's transparency and explainability, the black box problem. If you can't understand why an AI made a decision, especially in the public sector, it undermines trust and makes it hard to challenge errors. Accountability is another puzzle. Who's responsible if an AI system causes harm? The legal frameworks are lagging, and we need to ensure meaningful human oversight, preventing the erosion of human judgment, empathy, and agency.
And for blockchain ethics.
Blockchain brings its own set. Transparency is often touted as a benefit, but public ledgers can expose sensitive data, creating a tension with privacy. Immutability, the fact that records are hard to change, can be a problem if you need to correct errors or comply with things like the right to be forgotten. Smart contracts can be rigid and hard to alter as circumstances change.
Less flexibility.
Right. And while often promoted as decentralized, control over blockchain networks can sometimes become concentrated in the hands of a few powerful players. Access can also be an issue. You need literacy and resources to interact with blockchains, potentially excluding marginalized groups. And the pseudo-anonymity can be exploited for illicit activities if governance isn't strong.
And overarching both is data privacy and security.
Absolutely critical. The sheer scale of data collection involved in DPI and AI dramatically increases privacy risks. Given India's track record with data breaches, expanding this interconnected infrastructure without vastly superior security measures is risky. The potential for state or corporate surveillance grows enormously as datasets get linked. And ensuring truly informed consent for data sharing, especially with low digital literacy levels, is a major challenge. Effective enforcement of the DPDP Act will be absolutely vital.
Beyond the specifics of AI and blockchain, are there more general critiques leveled against this kind of accelerationist approach?
Yes, several broader points are often raised. One is the risk of neglecting root causes. Focusing on tech fixes might divert attention and resources from deeper structural reforms needed to address poverty, inequality, or environmental degradation. Another is the potential to exacerbate inequality. The benefits of acceleration might flow disproportionately to those with capital, skills, and access, leaving others further behind. IA talks about federated ownership of capital, but the mechanisms for achieving that would need to be very robust.
What about unforeseen consequences?
That's a big one. Rapid, large-scale technological deployment always carries the risk of unintended negative consequences. Ecological tipping points, social disruptions, cascading system failures. Managing these risks during a period of deliberate high-speed acceleration is a huge governance challenge. Some also worry about elitism, that these complex, tech-driven transformations might be decided and managed by a small group of technocrats or powerful interests, lacking broad democratic participation and accountability. And finally, as we touched on, the very term accelerationism has baggage, having been co-opted by some extremist groups, which could create reputational hurdles.
It certainly sounds like the success or failure of Indic Accelerationism hinges critically on navigating these contradictions and potential pitfalls. It's not just about the tech itself.
Precisely. Its viability depends fundamentally on navigating those inherent tensions, acceleration versus sustainability, acceleration versus inclusivity. It requires incredibly sophisticated, adaptive, and deeply ethical governance. The ethical and regulatory frameworks can't be an afterthought. They need to develop alongside or even ahead of the technological deployment to prevent harms like bias, privacy violations, widening inequality, or unchecked surveillance. It would be incredibly risky to just push the accelerator to the floor and hope the steering and brakes somehow catch up later. Ethical and regulatory readiness has to be seen as an integral part of the acceleration process itself.
We've certainly taken a comprehensive deep dive today into this ambitious and really multifaceted vision of Indic Accelerationism. It's clear it represents a unique attempt to weave together technological advancement with these critical goals of sustainability and inclusivity, all built upon India's rapidly evolving digital public infrastructure.
And you can definitely see the potential, right? If implemented effectively and equitably, It could lead to significant improvements in how government functions, how essential services are delivered, how the economy grows, and how citizens are empowered across India. The upside is potentially huge.
Absolutely. But as we've spent a good amount of time discussing, realizing that vision means confronting some really critical challenges and inherent tensions head on. Balancing that need for speed with sustainability and inclusion, bridging that persistent, stubborn digital divide, managing the sheer complexity of this layered digital ecosystem, overcoming the practical barriers to adopting new technologies at scale, building a truly robust and ethical data infrastructure.
Not to mention carefully navigating all those complex ethical dimensions surrounding AI and blockchain and addressing the valid broader critiques of accelerationist thinking in general. It's a minefield of potential problems.
It really is.
Yeah.
Which leads to the thought that ultimately the true measure of Indic Accelerationism's success might depend less on the sheer speed of the technological rollout.
And much more on the wisdom, the foresight, and the unwavering ethical commitment applied to navigating all these complexities, ensuring that the benefits are genuinely shared widely by everyone, and that it all happens within the safe operating space of our planet. The core focus has to shift from just accelerating to accelerating responsibly.
A truly delicate, maybe even precarious balance to strike. It certainly gives you, the listener, a lot to consider about the profound choices and responsibilities that come hand in hand with such a bold vision for shaping a nation's future. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.